Today on TrailMade, we're going to answer the question that we get asked the most. What camera gear comes along with us when we go out and shoot our Jeeps? Stay tuned. So before we get started, I'm going to give a little bit of a disclaimer. Gear is not everything. A lot of times a shot comes down to the person that's behind the camera, knowing how to operate it and using their experience that they gain over time in order to make whatever image or video they have in their mind come to life. With that out of the way, gear is actually really important. A lot of times it's the difference between a low quality or high quality image or video and being able to capture a scene the way that you had intended. So with that in mind, we're going to be going over the camera, lenses, filters, drone, gimbal that I use whenever I go out and shoot my Jeep. So before we dig into that stuff, I'm going to show you the camera bag that I put it all into. So this is the Wandered Provoke 31-liter version, and I absolutely love this bag. This thing's an absolute workhorse. I love the way that it stores the camera gear, and I hate side access bags. They're really inconvenient for me. I like being able to open it up completely and seeing everything that's inside of it right here. This is where I keep all my actual camera equipment, and up here is usually where I keep my gimbal, or if I'm out for a day trip, I'll throw some clothes in there, and it's really easy to access all of it. It has the top part that expands, so you can really fill this thing up all the way to here, access it from the top or access it from the inner pocket that I just showed you. And this thing is durable. I have taken this thing to Moab, to Johnson Valley, kicked it, scraped it, it's fallen a few times, and it takes a beating. It protects everything that's inside of it really well. But yeah, its storage capacity is fantastic. I know they did just come out with a 41-liter version of this bag, I believe, so I might look into that since we're expanding a lot of the gear we carry with us for videos. But for now, the Wandered Provoke 31-liter, it's fantastic. I would definitely recommend it to anybody that's looking for a nice durable bag that can take a beating, protect their stuff, and has tons of storage for lenses, cameras, all the stuff that you want to bring along with you. So Wandered Provoke, excellent bag. So the first thing we're talking about today is the camera itself. I'm using a Sony a7 IV, which is actually a recent upgrade for me over the a7 III I was shooting with up until about 2 months ago. The a7 III is a great camera, has a fantastic autofocus system, it rendered really nice images, and if somebody's trying to get into the Sony system and they either don't have the budget or they don't want to spring for the a7 IV, the a7 III is definitely the way to go. It's a pro level camera, and a lot of times I recommend it to people that are in that beginning to intermediate phase that want something that they can have for the next 3 to 5 years. There was a few things on the a7 IV though that were made me want to spring for it. First one being the sensor. It's 33 megapixels, which is more than enough for printing out big canvas photos, but it's not so big that it's taking up a lot of space on my hard drive. Has an improved autofocus system, so when we're out shooting moving pictures of the Jeep, it's important to maximize the amount of shots that come out in focus. The sensor also supports 4K 60 frames per second video, which is what's needed in order to do like slow motion, B-roll shots when we're doing these videos. It gets a nice buttery smooth image look to it. And then the last thing is this little flip out screen here on the side. So we knew we were going to be getting into YouTube, and we knew we were going to be doing talking head videos like this. So being able to frame our shot and kind of adjust it on the fly without having somebody else here in order to frame the shot for us was really important. There's lots of other little features that I love about this camera, and I'm still getting to know it. It's only been 2 months, so I anticipate this thing being my camera for the next 5 to 7 years. I'm not going to have any need or desire to upgrade because this has just a ton of features packed into it. I do have the camera wrapped around with a small rig cage. That's for protection, but it also gives some mounting points for any accessories we might get down the line. All I have right now is just a mic up on top, but we will be expanding maybe a monitor or something like that. But that's my camera setup. I'm really happy with it. It's pretty future proof, but it's gonna be great for going out, getting those action shots. And I love the way that it renders images, so I can edit it pretty easily. So Sony a7 IV, fantastic camera if you got the budget for it. But if you're just trying to get into the Sony system, Sony a7 III is a great option as well. So the piece of equipment that we get more questions about than anything else are the lenses. Now I have zooms and I have prime lenses. I have a preference for primes, but the zooms have come a long way as far as me wanting to use them, and I actually have them on my camera probably more than the primes now. We are going to start with the zooms, starting with this Tamron 17 to 28 f2.8. This is actually my only non-native lens for the Sony system. I was a little skeptical about it at first, but I actually love this lens. I don't use this to shoot the Jeep with though. With being such a wide lens, and this isn't a knock on the Tamron version itself, but just the focal length, with such a wide lens, it has a tendency to distort the shape of things. Jeeps are just giant boxes on wheels. So when you put a lens like this on your camera, it has a tendency to bow or make everything look real bubbly. It just doesn't look very proportionate. So I don't like the look of this when I'm shooting a vehicle. Now, the things that I do shoot with this though are one, vlogs. So when we're out in the field, I just throw this on the camera. I can hold it at arm's length, still get myself and like Jose when he's in the video and the Jeep in the background all in the frame. Can't do that with a more zoomed in lens, so it's really useful for that. And then the only other thing I really use this for is for landscape photography, which I don't do very much of it because I'm not very good at it. So, but it is nice to be able to whip this thing out when you're at cool places like here in Arches National Park and be able to get an entire surrounding in one shot. So Tamron 17 to 28 f2.8. Great for landscape, great for probably street photography, great for vlogging. I just wouldn't recommend it as my first choice if you're shooting vehicles, specifically Jeeps with it. So good lens overall. So the next lens we're talking about is my workhorse, and it's the one I'm actually filming with right now. And it's the Sony 24-70 2.8 G Master, and this thing lives on my camera. Ever since I got it like 6 months ago, I've been in love with this thing. I use it 99% of the time, and it covers pretty much anything I shoot. Most of the time when I'm doing a Jeep photo, it's this lens now. Even when we're doing some like installation videos and we don't need to have it at like vlog length, but a little bit further out, this lens is always on there. Just the images that come out of it are really good. It has a lot of character to the image itself. The autofocus pairs up really nicely with the Sony, but there's two main drawbacks to it. One, it is massive. It is heavy and it is large. It's bigger than pretty much any other lens that I have and probably weighs twice as much as any other lens that I have, with the exception of the 70-200 we're talking about next. So it's not the easiest. You have like a run and gun, really lightweight setup. This will be heavy, but that's just the nature of all this 24-70 2.8 lenses out there. There's some cheaper alternatives, and that brings me to my next point, which is the price. This was my most expensive lens that I have. It was not easy to bite the bullet on that, but I knew for the type of pro level photography and the variety of shots you can get with this one, I was gonna have to invest. But an alternative would be the Sigma 24-70 2.8. And if you follow Joe's photography, that's the one that he primarily uses. And we always go back and forth as far as which one's better. But I like the way that the autofocus works on this one a little bit better. And I just like the way that the colors come out of this one a little bit better as well. The images are all razor sharp. I don't ever have to worry about them being blurry as long as I'm at the right shutter speed. It's a fantastic lens. I absolutely love it. Would recommend it if you have the budget for it, but definitely check out the Sigma 24-70 if you want to go sub $1,000 on a lens. But this is going to be living with me for a really long time because I can do pretty much any type of photography with it. 24 is wide enough to be able to do landscape. We use it for our installation videos all the time if we don't need it at vlog length. Street photography, Jeep photography, obviously, any type of car photography for that matter. It's great, and the 2.8 does really well in the low light, gets you a nice shallow depth of field. All around, it's an awesome badass lens, and it really doesn't get much better than it. So Sony 24-70 f2.8 G Master, it's my go-to. All right, so we're gonna go from what is probably my new favorite lens to what is my least favorite lens. This is the 70-200 f4 G lens by Sony. I don't like this thing very much. It's not my sharpest lens, and what sharpness it does have has a real like clinical look that's not very natural, and it takes a lot of work in post in order to make the image come out the way that I like, which I just don't like having to put in extra work if I could just use an alternative that has the look that I'm going for. Yeah, it's not fantastic. It's heavy, it's bulky, it takes up a lot of space, but it is a necessity. When you have a 70-200, it covers a huge focal range that's useful in the places like Moab, Johnson Valley that are just physically massive, and you can't cover all that space by just moving your feet around. This is able to help you zoom in all the way to 200 and make an image capturable. So there are some redeeming qualities to this. It does have optical steady shot when it's paired up to the Sony camera stabilization. It allows you to get a nice crisp shot even when you are zoomed into 200 and you got to dump your shutter speed maybe a little bit lower in order to get some motion blur or something like that. This does come in handy, and that's, I believe, only on the Sony lenses that have the stabilization on the 70-200 range. But that's really where the pros end on this lens. Like I said, I don't really care for the image, but if you are looking to get a 70-200, I'd probably recommend, and you have the budget for it, I definitely recommend the 2.8 G Master version. It's bigger than this, but the images are considerably better. I used to have that lens itself, but I just didn't use it enough to justify the price. It's an expensive lens, and now they also have a Mark II version of that that's a little bit more lightweight than the original one, probably has a little bit better autofocus and just a better, cleaner image. But you're spending upwards of over $2,000 on those lenses. So it's hard to justify. An alternative I like to recommend is just pair up with your local camera shop. A lot of times they have a rental program that allows you to rent it for a couple days or a week, and it's going to be a lot cheaper than just spending all that money on the lens that you're only going to use once in a great while. So I go out and I shoot in big open places just enough to justify keeping this one, but once again, it's not one that I would really recommend. You can check out alternatives out on the web, but yeah, Sony 70-200 f4, not my favorite lens. So we're gonna be switching from my zoom lenses over to my primes, starting with the Sony 35 1.8. And you might be thinking this is an odd length for me to have since I got the 24-70 2.8, which definitely covers 35 millimeters. But I have this one for one major reason, and that's the size. This thing is tiny. It's definitely like half the size, if not more than the 24-70, and it's like a third of the weight of the 24-70. So it's a great alternative if I'm running and gunning. If I just want to take one of my smaller camera bags, just take a few lenses with me, 35 1.8 is a great alternative. This thing has amazing images, love the character on it. Anytime you use primes, they have a tendency to get a little bit better and more crisp shots than the zooms can. That gap between the quality of a zoom shot and the quality of a prime shot, it's getting smaller the more that the lenses advance, but there still is something really unique and wonderful about shooting with the prime. But yeah, like I said, the size is important to me. So I put this on the camera typically when I'm using the gimbal, because the gimbals, they have motors on them that can get worn out. They really have to work hard if there's a heavy setup on it. The A7 IV isn't a massive camera, but it's big enough and heavy enough, especially with the cage that I have on it, where it can strain the motor, especially if I'm using something like my 24-70 on there. It's real front heavy, and it just has to work harder. And I'd like to make the longevity of the motors on my gimbal last a little bit longer. So sometimes I'll throw this on there. 35s are really great focal length. Things still look pretty realistic as far as the way that we see them. The focal length is pretty standard. Some people say that they like 50 millimeters as their standard length. I just don't care for the look of it. The 35 to me is the right look. And like I said, the lens itself, the autofocus was fantastic. The image that comes out of here, whether for photos or videos, is great. I can't recommend this enough. I think it's my cheapest lens that I have. So if you're on a budget, you want to get into the primes, 35s, my second favorite prime, and we'll go over the next one here in a second. But this is great if you're looking for the wider end on a prime. So Sony 35 1.8, can't beat it. So I know I said that the 24-70 G Master was my favorite lens, but that's because it's a great mix between image quality and the versatility of that focal range. But if we threw versatility out the window and we were just going with the image quality to determine what's my favorite lens, the Sony 85 1.8 would take the cake. I absolutely love this lens. This was the first lens that I actually bought for my Sony system. It was the first prime I ever had, and it was difficult to get used to at first, simply because you can't zoom in or out in order to compose your shot correctly. You got to move your legs, you got to figure out how to work around a subject in an environment in order to compose a shot the way that you want it to. So it definitely presented a huge learning curve for me, but the images that come out of this thing are razor sharp. They're probably some of the sharpest that I have, but the character that's on the images from this are fantastic. It's something, the way that it captures the blacks. It has nice bold lines whenever I'm shooting with this. I recommend this to every single person that's looking for their first prime. This isn't anything fancy. This isn't a G Master version of this lens. It's my second cheapest lens that I've had, so it's within the budget of a lot of people. But I would recommend the 85 1.8 if you're looking to just get into primes, or if you're just looking for your first lens. You can't beat this. It's great for Jeeps. The telephoto has nice shallow depth of field. 1.8 does really well in low light scenarios as well. So no matter what you need, this thing just checks all the boxes for the perfect lens. 85 1.8, you will absolutely love it if you get this lens. So while the lens is the main factor that determines the quality of the image that comes out, there are a few accessories you can get for it that really enhances your image, and it can address certain issues that you can run into when you're either doing photography or videography. Now, I have two major types of filters, and then a third one we'll talk about a bit, but here, these are CPLs and variable ND filters, and they both have two different uses. So a CPL filter's only use is to cut down reflections on surfaces. So in automotive photography, that's very important, especially on Jeeps. They're just giant sheets of metal that reflect a lot. So when you take it out into nature, you'll see the reflection of the shrubbery on the side of the vehicle, you'll see the sky reflecting in the windshield, and it can be really distracting. It can take away from the image, and it overall doesn't look very clean. So when you use a CPL, you just turn it and you cut those reflections, resulting in a much more professional look. I remember when somebody recommended to me this for the first time, I threw it on my lens and it completely transformed my images. So if you're looking to just immediately up your game, CPL filters are the way to go with any surface that's reflective. Now, the other type of filter that I have is a variable ND filter, and this is only for videography. In short, it's sunglasses for your lens. When you're doing videos, you have to control your shutter speed in order to match accordingly with your frames per second that you're shooting at. You can do that in two ways. You can crank your shutter speed up in order to expose it correctly, because a lot of times it's overexposed. But what happens is that when there's moving subjects like this, they'll look really weird. They'll look really static. There's not going to be that natural blur like you see right here. Now, if you're overexposed, you can just throw a variable ND onto there, and it's going to darken up the image in a natural way to allow you to adjust your shutter speed accordingly, and once again, get that natural motion blur. Now, as far as the brands that I use, I'm not super specific to one, but I have had a tendency to switch over to PolaPro recently on a lot of my filters, and that's just for two major reasons, especially on the variable ND. One, they don't have much of a color cast. So when you're going with inferior filters, whether it's CPL or variable ND, sometimes they could create a little bit of a hue in your images that isn't ideal. Sometimes they make it look really blue, sometimes they make it look really yellow or green. It just makes it so it's a very unnatural color. When you use higher quality filters like PolaPro, they do have a little bit of a cast, but it stays much more natural compared to inferior filters. Now, the second upgrade, or the second difference from PolaPro compared to the other filters, is in the variable ND. And they get what's called like an X pattern, which is here, 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 and here. It gets really dark the more that you use your variable ND, and the higher the setting is on it and how dark it makes the image. It just looks really wonky and really weird in your video to have this dark spots all throughout your image. I don't use this one at the highest 9 stop. I usually keep it around 6, and at that setting, I never see it in my videos. So the PolaPros, they make really high quality products. They're a little bit expensive, but in my opinion, they're definitely worth spending the money on. Now, I said I have a third type of filter that I use, and that's an anamorphic lens. So if you've seen videos, I believe it's J.J. Abrams, the filmmaker, that has a light beam that goes across the entire screen. That's caused by an anamorphic lens. So I have that, and I rarely use it, but I do like to bring it out when I want to be creative, or maybe when I have a boring environment that needs to be spiced up. What it does is it takes whatever light beam or light that's in the image, most of the time in a vehicle that's the headlights, and it creates a cool light beam in the photo, like this one right here. It's really easy to overdo that, but every once in a while I like to break that out and get creative with my shots. It kind of gets my creative juices flowing, but that's a cool filter that I have on the side. But the main ones, CPL, variable ND. For the most part, I love my Polar Pros. So those are my filters. So the next piece of equipment that we're talking about today is probably my favorite to operate, and that's my drone. This is the DJI Mavic Air 2. For those of you who saw my video a couple months ago, you're probably thinking, didn't he crash his Mavic Air 2 into a mountain and it implode? Yes, it did. This is the replacement. Always get the warranty when it comes to the drones. You're definitely going to use it. With that said, the Mavic Air 2 has a ton of features that make this a great choice if you're just getting into drones, if you're looking for an upgrade over a budget drone. This does have obstacle avoidance, unless you're in sport mode, which I was when I hit a mountain. But if you're not in sport mode, which is the fastest flying mode, it's able to avoid any obstacles that are in its way. It can get 4K video. That actually comes out really well. We used it in this video, or wherever it's at, the Moab trip. All of the scene setting shots are with this, and that's really what I primarily use a drone for, is to set the scene of the environment we're in. No matter what lens you have on your camera, it's hard to be able to tell a story other than just eye level, but when you throw a drone up, it really gives the scale of a place. It really sets the scene in a way that's unique only to an aerial view. A good example of that is in Moab. When you're at top of the world, you can see the entire valley below you. You can see the edge where you park your Jeep on. It just gives a whole different perspective that's fun and sets a scene in just a really unique way. The video that comes out of this is really nice and sharp. It has features like it can follow you without you having to control the remote, which is really nice if you're doing this solo. Like I said, it has obstacle avoidance. It has pre-programmed shots where it can shoot itself into the sky and it keeps it focused on your vehicle. So there's lots of automatic features that come straight from DJI that are really useful and make this beginner friendly. There's a few other versions out there. The Mavic Air 2S, it has some features that I upgraded over this, but not enough to justify me making the upgrade. And the Mavic 3 is just way out of my price range for what I use it for. So the Mavic Air 2, it's the one I like to recommend to people. Lots of fun to operate, lots of fun to fly, even if I'm not getting footage. But yeah, if you got the budget for a drone, this is the one to go with. So the last piece of equipment we're talking about today is my gimbal, and this is a Zhun Weebill S, and I actually really like this little guy. It packs up really nicely where it has arms that just snap right off. There's also a spot for an arm right here at the top, so you can have it in underslung mode and get really low to the ground for those really nice cinematic shots. The power on this is great. It can handle pretty much all my lenses with the exception of the 70-200, which I don't think there's any gimbals out there that can handle that much weight. But this can handle everything else, including my 24-70 G Master, which is a pretty heavy lens. I just probably wouldn't use this if I was hanging out the side of a vehicle and there's that extra wind resistance that the motors have to compete with. For that, we'd probably want to make an upgrade to a Ronin M, which is on the horizon, but I don't know when because those are kind of expensive. But for everything else, when I'm standing on the ground, I got a Jeep driving around me and I'm just trying to pan with the shot and get it nice and buttery smooth, that's the primary use for this. I do have a second arm, so I have the tripod, and then I also have the underslung mode handle right here. But this thing's great. It has just enough power for what I need. It does get really nice, buttery smooth shots, and it's really user friendly. So this was the first gimbal that I had that I've used for a while, and it was really easy to get used to, calibrates real easily, real nice and easy to set up. So Zhun Weebill S, I couldn't ask for any more. Nice, light, Small, has just enough power. So that's a wrap on everything that goes along with me when I'm out shooting photos or videos of the Jeep. This was just kind of meant to be a top level summary of everything that's in my bag, but if you have specific questions on any of the gear you saw in this video, or maybe even on stuff that you didn't see in this video, feel free to drop a question in the comment section down below and I'll answer those for you guys. We are looking to make more videos like this in the near future where we focus on the photography aspect of off-roading and how we capture our shots. Maybe we do some more in-depth product reviews where I strap a GoPro to my chest for an entire day and only use one lens and can really go in depth on the pros and cons, maybe even stuff like how I can post shots with certain focal length. So those are all ideas that we have moving forward. If there's anything you guys would like to see related to photography, feel free to drop a suggestion in the comment section down below as well. While you're down there, make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We are excited to say that we just passed 100 subscribers a couple weeks ago, and that's a huge accomplishment for us. We're really proud of it. We're really excited to have you guys along for the ride, and can't thank you guys enough for the support. It really goes a long way, and we're really looking forward to making more videos like this in the near future. But until next time, take care, and we'll see you guys out on the road. Thanks.